The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have another fantastic guest for you today. But before we jump into the conversation, let me take a minute to remind you today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a whole lot more, including information about the NAILD LSC if you want to learn about getting certified in lighting controls. But also, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We cannot do this without your support, MaxLight and your CMax Lighting Controls platform. If you're unfamiliar with the brand MaxLight or the lighting controls platform CMax, I highly recommend you go to maxlite.com/CMAX to check it out, because it's a really interesting, innovative solution for lighting controls. And they're really trying to stay ahead of all of the changes that are happening in lighting and lighting controls. They're trying to provide a very versatile system that really hits on a lot of the issues that are happening in especially the rebate side of things. But it's a patented USB-C port they have on their controls ready fixtures that allows you to just quickly swap in and out product, or even just kind of lay in the foundation and then decide later on what you want for your lighting controls to do. And they can go from basic all the way up to networked lighting control solutions. It's really worth checking out. So go to maxlite.com/CMAX to learn more. But let's get into the conversation. So today we have Kyle. Kyle, do you mind just giving us a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
Sure. Kyle Hemmi. I work with CLEAResult in essentially the utility energy efficiency implementation space. Started out in distribution, electrical distribution, did that for about 8 years, went and did some graduate work, came back to save the world, and have essentially over the past 22-ish years been working in this space. Didn't, like most people, didn't originally get started in lighting. I was an automation specialist, but we ended up doing a lot of pulse start metal halide projects, and so headed up to a couple of manufacturer trainings. And then when I came back and got into the energy efficiency space, the first question I got was, anybody know anything about lighting? Because lighting has been a staple for energy efficiency programs for the better part of those 2 decades. So yeah, seeing some changes now. So a lot more focus and energy now on the control side and even into the integration space. As we see lighting activity slow a little bit, as things get changed out to LED, there's a little bit less for the programs to do on the fixture lamp side of things. So a lot more energy and focus on the control side. So that's where I spend most of my space, my time. Been doing a lot of broader strategic energy management work, but that experience with HVAC, large air handlers, refrigeration, etc., really merges in nicely with this push towards lighting and HVAC integration. So that's been interesting and helpful. But yeah, going on around 30 years overall. So just trying to bring that experience, trying to get people up to speed, trying to get more and more momentum behind controls and some of these other efforts
Well,
in
so
that
I mean,
space.
thanks for coming on. I mean, it's great to have people like you who have all of this experience and visibility to areas that we don't necessarily have. And so, from your perspective, what are you seeing are the major friction points for lighting controls adoption?
Yeah, I wish I could say that they're different, than they were kind of at the inception. I remember we ran our first controls only program back around 2016, right when this whole NLC QPL thing was kind of happening.
Right.
And so there weren't a lot of products in the marketplace. Um, a lot of vendors were struggling to get product
Sure.
out the door around that
Hmm.
time frame. So, it was a real struggle just getting product, and then it was a struggle educating the market and kind of getting
Right.
customers and contractors comfortable, but also making sure the incentives are there to kind of make the value proposition, strong enough to
Yeah.
to to incentivize that. And again, not much has changed. There are a lot
Hmm.
of regions where incentives, because of rates and because of where costs for electricity and that are, there's they're not able to offer like huge incentives like we saw in the Northeast, Northwest, and a few other places where you can just kind of really put your foot on the scale and create a value proposition that delivers paybacks in the 6 month, 12
Hmm.
month time frame. And so we're still struggling to you know make that value proposition whole. We still have
Sure.
resistance with your traditional lighting maintenance type contractors and ESCOs that make up the bread and butter of the engine behind
Yeah.
programs.
Mm.
So we're still not seeing all of them get on board. Customers are resistant. They want lights that turn on and turn off and
Yeah.
provide light for the most part. So convincing them of all the additional benefits and flexibility of controls is an uphill battle. And if it has a 3-4+ year payback, and so there's still a lot of work to do just to get contractors comfortable so that they're pricing it competitively and not you know
Yeah.
trying to cover the
Right.
extra installation costs
Yep.
that may be perceived, that may be real in some cases. But there's still a lot of resistance, and codes really haven't been, I would say, that impetus. Granted,
Mm.
there hasn't been a ton of activity in codes in the vast majority of,
Right.
of the US. We see pockets,
Yep.
where they're really pushing the envelope in the Northeast and the Northwest, California, but those other pockets are,
Right.
a few of them, they're still batting with, ASHRAE 2007 or 2010
Hmm.
or, you know, really getting out there, but not many like in that ASHRAE 2022, IEC 2024 type ballpark. So,
Hmm.
and even then, on the retrofit side, you don't see a lot of teeth, I guess, kind of
Mm.
on the kind of the regulatory code enforcement side of things that
Sure.
are really checking like were 50% of my systems change out were, and
Yep.
so we just don't see a lot of activity on the code forcing a lot of activity on the retrofit
Hmm.
side of things. Obviously new construction's a little bit different and programs are set up to kind of capture that, but
Yep. Yep.
still a lot of uphill battles. And then yeah, if you want to talk to them about integration, they're just we're struggling just to get enough folks out there that understand the value proposition of lighting,
Right.
um, can handle it, can do proper control narrative sequence, uh, specification and setup. um, there just really aren't. If there's a handful of those people in each market, there's often nobody in a lot of
Right.
these markets, especially as you get more rural, that can
Yep.
do true integration with HVAC systems. So
Hmm.
excited about some
So,
of the stuff that's happening on the Bluetooth side with
yep.
that, but we can talk about that a little bit later.
So based on your experience, Kyle, what's just starting with the customers, what is sort of that biggest hurdle that you're seeing with customer adoption? Is it strictly for some people an ROI payback? Is it, fear of adoption from previous failed efforts? What is the biggest hurdle you're seeing with
Mm.
customers?
Yeah, I would say the biggest hurdle is cost, because that's one that everybody's looking at. And again, if you don't
Mhm.
align the incentives, with, a competitive bid, um, it's just not going to add up in most markets. So again, that's kind of like a filter. So if it doesn't pass through that
Yeah.
portion of the filter, then you don't even get to the point where, you're really able to talk about the value proposition and what it means. And, as you get into smaller, medium-sized businesses, they're trying to keep the lights on, they're trying to
Mhm.
get employees paid.
Mm.
And it's that same person often that's doing that is tasked with taking care of these systems. So they are hesitant. There
Mhm.
is a lot of resistance in putting in something they don't understand, and those experiences they may have had with your standard standalone type wall vacancy or ceiling mounted dock sensor.
Mhm.
Some of those experiences do live. It only takes a couple of bad
Right.
experiences, to kind
Yep.
of drown out, you know,
Yeah.
lots of good experiences. Because as you know, the good experiences, what is a good experience in lighting? It's it's often nothingness. It's
Right.
often
You don't
you don't
notice it.
you don't know
Yeah,
it's
right.
there, and
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
doing what you want, so you don't register the the 20, 30,
Right.
363 good experiences you had that year, but those 2 days that you had a problem with that aux sensor or that switch,
Yep.
Yeah.
um, those stand out in your mind. So it's
No,
a
we
hurdle,
we are
but those,
we are
yeah.
dealing with a huge amount of confirmation bias in our industry when it
Hmm.
comes to whether lighting controls work or not, and it's almost like we need to have a flawless entry when we're trying to show somebody the capabilities of lighting controls. And so, what are the most common issues that you hear about the bad experiences that people have had?
I mean, there's the typical kind of my lights went out,
Mm,
when I didn't want them to go out.
sure.
So, false triggers. Um, you see the full run of the mill things. Like again,
Mhm.
I had a couple projects like earlier in the year where switches weren't pairing properly. So, that one
Oh dear.
stands out in my mind.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and they just didn't have, proper control over their lights. Um,
Hmm.
Daylighting can be a challenge, especially in
Yeah.
retrofit scenarios. If they're not properly set up, you can get some disparity between groups, etc., that creates kind of an awkward feel. So that's one that I've bumped into a lot. But it's really kind of on that occupancy side. And then I would say, perhaps not completely related to the control aspect of it, but it's too bright. It's not
Yeah.
Yep.
bright enough. And in our business where you're shifting from one technology to another, there's so much that's changing.
Right.
And it could be the color temperature that's really triggering this feeling, that they have that something's not right. Um, and again, if you're not watching that lumen package, if you're not, a lot of the products
Mhm.
that go out the door now are color and wattage
Mhm.
selectable. If you're not getting it in that right lumen package for a particular application, you can overshoot. I still
Yeah.
walk into offices that have 60, 70. I saw one the other day that was 80, 80.1.
Wow.
I remember it. 80.1 foot candles on a desk.
Wow.
It's just a
Jeez.
little bit too much, even for
Yeah, just a
our
tiny
the
bit.
the the visually impaired. Um, it's just a combination of things, and
Yeah.
for them, again, they just know that there's too much light, there's not enough light. it feels different, it feels weird, or it's
Mm,
acting strange because it's turning on and
Hmm.
off, or so again, there's lots of potential failure points. Some are directly related to the control, some are indirectly related because maybe it did get task tuned properly.
Right.
Um, but a little bit of everything. But in terms of the horror stories or bad controls experiences, the one that pops up probably the most is just false triggering and
Sure.
occupancy
mhm.
sensors not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, it's funny. We are creatures of habit, right? So you mentioned it being too bright or too dim. And a lot of times, or even like you said, color temperature. It may have been that someone was sitting in their office with what might have been the inappropriate color temperature the whole time. And then you do this retrofit and you drop the lumen package down because it was too bright before, and you adjust the color temperature to something that is more in line with what they should be doing in that space. But you get someone who's been working in that space for so long and they were so used to that now they don't like the new setting they've been put
Yeah.
in, and they feel like they have no control over this at all. Even if they have dimming capability, they now have zero
Hmm.
control over this environment, and that can sometimes lead to people having what they feel is unfortunately a bad experience. So I guess the human factor here is so important. We're all so
Hmm.
used to lighting controls and understanding it, and knowing that these things take time sometimes to get right. It's never going to be perfect day one, right? We tell people that all the time. Live with it for a month, write down every issue you have. We'll come back, we'll reprogram, we'll adjust with you.
Yeah.
It's never going to be right day one. But how do we explain that to people to start to
Mm.
get more people to buy in, understand that it is a living, breathing entity, and it is never going to be perfect on day one.
Just like you did. Yeah. You know, when I work, I go out and I do a lot of training, with
Hmm.
our individual program teams and outreach teams all the time. And I mean, to some extent, I mean, I like to lead with the flexibility of these systems, especially when you have a
Mhm,
control system present, just as, and that's a good lead in with the contractors that are doing the work, and also the outreach people when you're talking to
Yeah.
customers. And again, lead, like you said, with, look, these systems are flexible. We're going to try to, and then collect the necessary information, like have that
Mm.
conversation beforehand. So it's not just, what do you have and what am I going to put in? It's,
Yeah.
what do you have? Oh, let me take a light reading. And actually see kind of where you're at foot candle wise. Let me make note of the color temperature and kind of how it may vary from space to space to space.
Hmm.
Um, basic, again, you've got a big warehouse, you go into the office, it looks more like, you know, the warmer color temperature, and you go out into the warehouse, it's cooler color temperature, like Webster's background's a little bit on the cooler side there.
Hmm.
So you make note of that, you have those conversations. um I like, I mean, contractors are doing this naturally because just from a supply side, having wattage selectable, color selectable products
mhm,
gives them some flexibility. They can put,
Right.
one product in a truck and they can probably take care of most of those needs. So having that discussion, asking the customer, like, we're seeing X,
mm,
on the foot candle front. How does it feel to you? Do you feel like it's too bright or not bright enough? You know, what
Hmm.
what have the other occupants said? How do they feel? And get a good feel for, you know, how they feel about their space. And then, if they're perfect, if they like it just like that, then you try to replicate that and then utilize the settings to kind of tweak things as needed.
Mm.
But I mean, it really is about having that conversation. You're not going to be able to keep everybody happy. Often we're talking to the decision
Yeah.
makers or the maintenance manager or the owner, and we have to start there, but
mhm.
there are 10, 20, 50 other occupants in the room, and we try to get a
Yeah.
feel for that. Gather as much information as you can, try to
Well, and I
hit the
imagine
target,
there's
and
there's
then
still some
adjust. Yeah.
lost in translation there too, because
Yeah.
I just had a conversation recently with somebody who was convincing me that LEDs were too bright, and it turned out that her experience was that she was dealing with cool color temperatures the entire time.
Mm,
And so brightness in her mind was color temperature, which is a common
Mhm.
conflation that people make.
yep.
So I imagine that it's hard to kind of tease out when you have 50 people in a room what they're talking about.
Yeah. That term in particular is problematic.
Yeah.
In the training I just did last week, with our program team, we had that pause moment where I said, "Well, what do you mean by brightness?"
Yeah.
Because brightness can be associated with those cooler color temperatures, and there
Yep.
is a perceived brightness as uh,
Yep.
increase as color temperature does rise, regardless of the light level.
Hmm.
But um, I have a slide I like to use, which kind of starts at 80%, 2500 K-ish. It moves,
Hmm.
up the gradient to 90%, in that 3500, and then it bounces over here at full power. And if you're pulling both those levers, at the same time, you can really have an impact. And just being able to see that on the screen and seeing that dramatic difference, and with
Hmm.
minor changes in overall light level, going from 80 to
Right.
100% is not that big of a change.
Yep.
um, it really is. Yeah, the color temperature really plays a big role and function in there, is especially if your surfaces are amenable to grabbing
Yeah.
it. If you have those lighter color surfaces, but even any surface, will pick up
Hmm.
differences going from 2500 all the way up to like 5000. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot talking to our outreach staff. It's a lot talking to your typical lighting contractor, even just to
Yeah.
grasp, the overall, basic, what are pretty basic design elements, but
Mm,
controls, color selectable, wattage selectable,
yep. Yep.
LEDs have
Right.
kind of opened up Pandora's box. Whereas before, they would go in and put, 28-watt lamps where there were
Right.
25-watt lamps, and they would just change to that one available product. But now,
Mm,
So, I mean,
I
it sounds
guess,
like the best solution, at least at this level, when we're talking about specification grade, we're talking about the ability to really, pre-select and diagnose and provide something that really meets the needs. But in this kind of environment, it sounds like giving more flexibility is a much better key instead of, we've heard a lot of people talking about education. And I think that's still important, but I think it's not just education, but it's also the tools that we're giving to people to be able to provide adequate lighting for spaces and adequate controls. So I think, maybe something that we need to evaluate is how we are providing controls and what tools those are being like what tools people are able to utilize in this environment.
yes. And just understanding the reality that you're not going to have a designer or even an installer with adequate design experience,
Right.
that they're going to be able to take that customer through a proper design or specification process. This
Hmm.
is, one for one, get them some light, get in,
Yeah.
get out. And so it's the training process to kind of emphasize why it's important. It's giving them, some basic design understanding and elements to just put in their toolbox. And then it's like you said, familiarizing them enough with those settings and the
Mm,
dials that they can turn
Hmm.
to kind of maybe not get it perfect, like museum
Right.
grade
Right.
design
Yeah.
quality, spec quality, Class A office quality, but get it closer than what it would have been
Hmm.
without any of those tools and any of that training and understanding. But there's still a significant void or lack of that
Yeah.
overall design expertise. And then likewise, there's an unfamiliarity with how to turn all those dials within a control system. The switches they get, you know,
Yeah.
um, low, medium, high,
Yep. Yep.
3,000, 3,500, 4,000. That's pretty straightforward. So build off that and just know that the controls on top of something like that, or controls where you don't have color wattage selectable, really give you the ability to, at least dial in
Hmm.
the proper light levels.
Yeah. And I would say, man, it really speaks to the role of the lighting designer here, right? Like bringing in someone who can assist you with your design and help you understand color, temperature, and all of that. And not every project has the money for a lighting designer, and I understand
Hmm.
that. But that doesn't mean you can't bring in the right people. The reps are always available. There are plenty of people who you could bring in, even if it's for a single visit at likely no cost, because they're going to assist you with the product selection and they're hopefully going to see the sale from that. So they're going to come in as part of that team. So whether you're the contractor or whoever, there's no reason you can't engage your local distributor or the rep and bring them in to assist you with your design. And I think unfortunately the big box stores have played a big part in some of the issues that people have, right?
Hmm.
Everything
Hmm.
is, it's cool white, warm white. There's a lot, oftentimes you can't find all the CCT information on the lamp boxes. You get cool white, warm
Yeah.
white, and now everything is fixture and color selectable, and people don't necessarily know what they're looking for. They could do so much of a better job, just simple, this color temperature is ideal for X, Y, or Z. This is ideal
Hmm.
for this or this. I can't tell you how many kitchens I walk into and they have white cabinets and white subway tile, and they put in 2,800 or 3,000 Kelvin lamps because they like warm white through their entire house or through their entire office and space. And then you go, yeah, but your white cabinets are yellow. Like, did you not? Your white tile is
Hmm.
yellow. They're supposed to be white. And so just understanding those things. So knowing that, a
Mhm.
lot of this unfortunately does stem from those sort of things. You know, how do we make sure that people understand that there are these additional resources out there to them that they, if they don't have the money for a designer, they can engage with it very easily at probably minimal to no cost.
Yeah, in essence, that's kind of my job. That's what I'm doing day in and day out. Um, so we can't get, like you said, a designer on every job, but we can get, as you mentioned, just leveraging that supply chain, leveraging the manufacturers, leveraging their agencies, who are, in essence, the horsepower in any given
Hmm.
market. That's where the
Yep.
bulk of your lighting professionals reside within the larger kind of agencies. Um, there are some distributors and other organizations that have that area of expertise, and we're going to bump into designers on some of the bigger projects, and so we leverage those, we take advantage of those to have those contractors kind of learn and see that. But everywhere else, it's about trying to pair the experts in the market up with your
Hmm.
bread and butter
Hmm.
horsepower lighting trade allies in that market, and training. So I see the lighting supply chain as that training channel. It's trying to get the message out, trying to work with those individual contractors, work with them, at least work with them on one project, and so that they can see through experience. It's better than trying to beat it into their heads over a
Hmm.
2 hour training class, you know, outside of that space. So it's leveraging that supply chain, those experts as a vehicle to train and educate and try to, pull up that understanding, pull up that level of knowledge. And then programs kind of have that role too. So building that into your program budget, making sure there's money in there for
Hmm.
training, making sure there's money in there to have more, engineers go out and work with your trade allies on individual projects, going out and checking kind of pre and post, what those
Yeah.
outcomes are, getting feedback from customers. Maybe there's a couple of trade allies you need to work with a little bit more because we've had a couple of bad outcomes. So,
Hmm.
training, QA/QC, feedback,
Yeah.
surveys, and then training and training some more to
Yeah.
address the problem areas that are popping up. And again, each market's different,
Hmm.
each group of trade allies, each program's different, each state is different.
I mean, if
But
you could
yeah,
if you could put a number to how many hours of training would be an average for a group to be able to kind of go from lack of awareness to being able to at least provide some level of quality service, what would you give for a number?
I don't think there's a number in
Sure.
terms of that first training because I think this is an iterative process. And if you don't connect
Mm.
the classroom with the field and allow
Yeah.
them or give them the ability or kind of force the issue to where you're
Hmm.
saying, when we go out and do trainings, I mean, like anything beyond a half day, and your typical contractor is they're checked out, they're thinking about their
Right.
projects, you're going to
Yeah.
lose them.
Sure.
So I would say kind of it's about a half day up front,
Hmm.
maybe 3.5 to 4 hours of kind of intensive. Let's get these basics out of the way, and then it's kind of
Hmm.
working with them
Yeah.
in the field, making sure that you connect that to actual projects, um, and making sure you get your outreach person out with them. Because when you're training, they're coming up with ideas and they're saying, "Oh, I've got this,
Yeah.
outpatient hospital type facility, or I've got this school district I'm working. Can you come out with me and let's talk through this and let's apply some of these principles?" But then I think you have to bring them back
Hmm.
for like another half day for part two. Now let's bring this
Yeah.
all back. Let's talk about what you've learned and let's take it one step further because 4 hours, I mean, you're probably just trying to get the nomenclature. You're trying to answer those
Yeah.
brightness questions. You're
Yep.
trying to
Well, it's
just get the basic stuff out of the way and give them the foundation. And then you need to connect it with the field. And then you need to bring them back and
Yep.
reinforce it with at least like another half day training. But ideally, they would get a good 3, 4 days,
yeah.
but not a
Yeah.
lot of people are going to carve out that time or carve out that budget
Sure.
necessary to
Yep.
do that. But that would be ideal.
So training is something we talk about a lot on this show, and you made me think: are we doing a bad job in general as an industry with training? Are we not providing enough resources to people, or are we
Mm.
overcomplicating it? Are we
Mm.
neglecting those initial 4-hour sessions to really give people the basics, the level one upfront? Are we just looking at people saying, "Here's a 2-day, 3-day, 4-day class, come learn everything," and we're just completely overwhelming them to a point that this isn't for me, it's too much, I'm scared of it? So do we need to take a step back and simplify things to engage people and get them involved first?
Yes. I realized there were two questions and
There
two
were,
options
it's all
in there,
good.
but but I don't think we're doing enough first.
Yep.
So the magnitude of the problem or the magnitude of the void or the shortage is so large that we could spend, half our time out there just
Yeah.
doing training and not sales.
Yep.
But the reality of the situation is most lighting professionals are out there spending 95+% of their time selling
Right.
Yeah.
and
Yep.
only a small, very small, and then that's just a small percentage of a small percentage of the workforce that
Right.
actually
Yep.
has that goal and function. So, no, I mean, for the most part, I think we're undershooting, and
Hmm.
we're just trying to go in there and we bring in a demo kit and we show them for 30, 40 minutes, and then we sell them the rest of the time, and we're not really focusing on what their needs are or what they really need to know, or even checking with them like, are we even on the same page with this understanding
Yeah.
of brightness and
Yep.
uh
Yep.
you know do you have access to IES recommended light levels for all these spaces? Do you know the difference between this space and this application, this task,
Hmm.
what
Right.
age has to do with it, yada yada yada. But so I think we're undershooting most of the time. We don't have enough resources out there, and then sometimes we do go out and we over complicate it, and we try to shove too much down the throat of someone who's not quite ready um,
Yep.
for it. But the experience I had with the nail training not too long ago, I think that was just right. I mean, those people were ready
Mm.
for it. Those people were able to absorb 2 or 3 days of training, and they were the people who needed it and could go out and do that. It was well suited to their needs. But I think we miss the base a lot of times. We
Yeah.
have kind of these one size fits all, and that's not just
Hmm.
at the association level. Like if you go to the individual manufacturers, it's kind of a one size fit all. Here it is, it's on my website,
Yeah.
but is it someone's job? Is it everybody's job to train? I think it is an 80-20 rule. Like we think about
Yeah.
things where we're supposed to spend like 60, 70, 80% of our time planning to get a good
Yep.
20% delivery. If we're not out there getting people on a level where they can make decisions and good design decisions and apply the product, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure a lot of times. We want to
Right.
sell a lot of that product, but if we're putting it into the hands of someone and not giving them the tools they need to properly apply it, we may be cutting into our sales. So,
Yeah.
maybe we need to spend at least 10% or 12% or 15%. That little bit of extra effort up front will pay dividends over
Yep.
Yeah.
time. It's like what
Yeah.
I think about when we're working with a specific lighting trade ally in a program. I can build them up now. And granted, it may take me 10 hours or 12 hours of my time, but as soon as I get them out the door and they're out there doing work for the program, they're the
Mm.
horsepower, they're the engine. And if
Right.
they're doing a 10% or a 15% better job on the next 85 projects that they do in the program, that's a win. They just saved
Right.
me. Otherwise, I would have been spending 20, 30, 40 hours of my time kind of fixing or cleaning up or
Yep.
trying to go out and get more projects. But it's really spending that upfront time necessary to get people where they need to
Yeah.
be and the understanding, because they're going to, and it's the same for a customer. You're getting them up to speed. They're going to go out and do more and more projects. They're going to go out and do, more and more wings or more and more schools in their school district. But taking the time to really work with them and have that good experience
Hmm.
up front,
Hmm.
that's where we've really seen the most success from a controls standpoint.
Hmm.
It's really working closely with one or two, like what I would call kind of champion controls contractors. And once they get it, once they fully understand it, once they get really comfortable with it, they go out and drive like a lot of extra, a lot of additional
Yeah.
projects.
Yep.
They're
Yep.
doing 60, 70, 80% of their projects with controls as opposed to 6, 7, or 8%.
Hmm.
And so we,
Yep.
we need to take that capacity workforce development perspective here, because we're trying to go too fast.
Mm.
We're trying to sell too much too early. And we,
Yeah.
we've kind of left a lot of people stranded back here on the boat dock that aren't
Mm.
quite ready to take that step. And that's both on the contractor side and the customer side to an extent.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time here, and I think that this really it hits on a great message for our industry because of the fact that there's a lot that's going on in our industry, and we, like you said, we do kind of charge forward without making sure everybody else is on board. And so I'm
Yep.
just going to try to package this conversation that we had here, because I think it's critical for people to understand the problem we're having. And really, the problems with lighting controls, like you said, haven't changed. It's still the same
Right.
issues: false offs, daylight intensity values not correct,
Yep.
people having a perception of incorrect color temperature, brightness, or inaccessibility to the switches in general. So I think, we still have those issues. So the fact that we still have those issues that have always been here means that we really haven't corrected the core issue of lighting
Right.
controls from a end user standpoint. Now, granted, we've certainly done a lot of innovation and false offs are less frequent, but again, it's that confirmation bias. Once it
Hmm.
happens, that's it. You've lost the opportunity because of that mistake. And sometimes it's, really sloppy, gross negligence almost, where, somebody puts a PIR only sensor in a bathroom at the entrance. And I actually just had this experience and took a picture of it. It was a wall box sensor, PIR only, for an entire shared restroom. And the lights clicked off on me while I was using it. So, these still happen on a regular basis. And part of that issue is knowledge,
Yep.
education. But the other thing is the tools available to the people we're trying to educate. So, trying to give them the resources. I'm sure that wall box sensor had been used a million times in other places, and the contractor just went, "Yep, this is perfect. I've used this again and
Yep.
again. It's tried and true." And
Yep.
yeah, it probably is fine for 90% of the time, and then that 10%, okay, well, sucks to be you. But you know, having better accessibility, better tools for those people to really utilize, um, alongside that education. And I think, again, to your point, education is not sufficient alone. And so, yeah, we could have a 10-day long training
Yep.
available, but who's going to sign up for that? Who's going to actually take the time to dedicate their, unbilled time to take that? But also, we need to have that sort of practicum baked into education. We need to give people the opportunity to really test out what they learned and then come
Hmm.
back and reinforce and learn more. And so I think those two things we really do a disservice of. We don't, we do a lot of education. We like to dump knowledge onto people, but we don't give it to them in an accessible way that works for them. We give it in an accessible way that works for the instructors. And so I think something that we could do a lot better is meeting people where they're at with education and helping and kind of facilitating rather than instructing.
Mm.
And, I think if we have the right tools and the right education from what you're saying, we can absolutely go back and help those people who got left behind and bring them forward, and maybe even address some of these issues that have always been, and kind of help people look at lighting controls with less of a, disgruntled feeling, and more of a, I mean, ideally an indifferent feeling would be best,
Mm.
because if you don't have an opinion about your lighting controls, then they're probably working just fine. So, I think ultimately we need to get end users to that point. Excited's great. I have nothing against
Hmm.
excited. I would love if everybody was excited, but, that's why I have a job, because it's very few people who get excited about lighting controls. So, but yeah, I mean, having people like you out there helping move that needle, at least, we do need that education. But I think, again, we need to do a better job of just improving how we educate, and what tools we use in that education.
Yeah, and it's even more important now because to some extent, yes, the problems are the same, but we're actually providing them with more tools or more weapons So
Yeah.
there's an even greater danger with additional flexibility, with additional power becomes greater responsibility. So there's even
Right.
more of a need, more of a mandate that we need to take to go out there because these systems are more powerful. They can do more
Right.
things, but you can also, point them in the wrong direction and come
Right.
up with even worse outcomes because there's so many more dials and settings and things like
Hmm.
that. So we need to, again, make sure we arm them, start slowly, work with them, and really go on a journey with
Yeah.
them,
Yep.
uh, hand in hand. You got to look at it that way. You got to have that picture, almost like maybe a bad analogy, but like a child, like walking with them
Mm.
through their adolescence into those teenage years where they're going to do some crazy, stupid stuff. And then over here, finally getting them into adulthood and they're out there on their own, kind of delivering
Right.
these projects. But
Yep.
we need to be thinking about each and every one of our, from a program standpoint, each and every one of those trade allies that participate in our program. And, there's another kind of mandate or important aspect, as saturation starts to happen and these lighting contractors see fewer and fewer projects, we're also, on our end trying to help them see the future and see the possibilities of increasing their service levels or changing their
Hmm.
Hmm.
business models to something that's going to be compatible with with
Right.
the future state. You're just not going to see that many projects. So what can you do? Back in
Yep.
the day, you used to have lighting service contracts where you would go back out and you would group relamp for them. Well, probably
Yep.
don't need to go out and group relamp. So can I help, keep those controls properly commissioned? Can I go in and regularly address, just like an HVAC contractor comes in and
Right.
changes the filter, make sure the condensate line is cleared out?
Yep.
Do that with your lighting control system. Do that with your lighting systems. Be that. And then as we move into this integration and all those other benefits and everything, it's going to happen. It's a very slow process. That's
Yep.
Yeah.
moving very slow, especially with the headwinds we're seeing right now in the industry. But thinking about that, working towards that as a business, thinking about that as a business model and building those capabilities. Again, taking yourself in an integration sense, taking yourself from childhood into adolescence, into adulthood, in a 3, 4, 5 year time frame when these things are likely to start getting more traction and you can start
Hmm.
building business models around those types of services and moving from say just a lighting contractor to a full-blown energy services contractor or a
Yeah.
full-blown
Hmm.
service provider on some of these other fronts, like security or whatever it is you feel like you want to get into or move into. So we've got that mandate. We've got to be that impetus, at least
Hmm.
programs, industry professionals. We've got to be there to kind of help those folks through their own specific journey. And if they're not successful, we're not
Right.
successful to a great extent.
Yep.
So there are our employees, like our customers, not just directly, but they may just be our internal customers, et cetera. But um, we have to help them succeed, and in turn, that'll help us and our respective organizations succeed as well
Hmm.
if they're successful.
Mhm.
Yep. Well, Kyle, man, thank you so much for your conversation today. It's been absolutely fantastic. And you've reiterated the fact that we need to do a better job with training as an industry. And we need to think about simplifying things and taking it back to basics. I mean, even if you think about some of the simplest things, forget the entire building interior. Building exterior, more oftentimes, a lot of larger cities have mandates and have laws requiring what is required for the types of lighting, color, temperature, etc. But there are a lot of smaller cities and areas where they don't, and we see a lot of glare bombs, a lot of wall packs, so different color temperature from building to
Mm-hmm.
building, a lot of really dark spots, a lot of really bright spots, shadow area. Like there's so many differences. And so just doing a better job of getting to the general public and providing these simple resources, which could be as easy as going around to these different, sort of market areas and saying, having these sort of free, it could be an hour, right? 1 hour training on types of exterior lighting and things, like keeping it really simple, but engaging with them to train them on how understanding color, temperature, intensity, perceived brightness, how to properly install the lighting so you're not blinding everybody as they're driving by or walking down the sidewalk. Or there's so much more that we can be doing. And you really just sort of reiterated that to us, that as an industry, we do a pretty decent job, I think, about professional continuing education, but not breaking it down to the end user and really bringing it back to the beginning. So thank you for really driving that home for us today. Really appreciate your time. I
My
will
pleasure.
close this out and remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a whole lot more. But also, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We cannot do this without your support, CMAX, lighting controls platform from MaxLight. It is an excellent resource if you're looking for those tools to learn about lighting controls and get, your projects done quickly and easily. It is an excellent way to tap into that. So check it out, maxlite.com/CMAX. They have a whole lot of information on there. It's worth checking out. But thanks for joining us. And Kyle, thank you. This was an awesome conversation.